Good afternoon and welcome to today's live stream event here on DreamBank's Facebook page. My name is Andy Friskin. I'm very excited to introduce our featured speaker here. But before I go ahead and do that, I just want to give a little bit of context as to what DreamBank is and why we're here. So DreamBank is located in the heart of Madison, Wisconsin, and is put on by American Family Insurance. The whole reason why DreamBank exists is to help inspire people to pursue their dreams. And in large part, we do that through the programs that we put on, typically in our physical space. But since the quarantine for the pandemic, we've been doing these virtually. So we host right around 40 free events a month in our space, anything ranging from small business and entrepreneurial workshops to inspiration and motivational wellness speaker series. We host fitness events, family-related events, so we really try and cover the gamut and appeal to as many different dreamers as possible. But let me go ahead and introduce our featured speaker today, Kann. So Chris has over 30 years of business experience, including time in corporate marketing positions and as an entrepreneur. She has always felt called to the world of business, loving every minute of her time at the University of Wisconsin-Madison while receiving her bachelor's and master's degrees in business. After spending over a decade in public and private companies, Chris started her first business and connected with her true calling as an entrepreneur. As a registered corporate coach, Chris brings her knowledge of the ups and downs of corporate environments, career transitions, and work-life challenges to her sessions with clients. She believes that the best way to be an exceptional leader, business owner, or manager is to know yourself. Knowing your own strengths, weaknesses, work style, drivers, emotional intelligence, and triggers allows you to make the most of your natural gifts, as well as to see them in others. Using items such as a custom disc analysis, time management assessment, and other tools designed for personal and professional insight, she helps to guide clients to experiencing more fulfillment in their life and career. Without further ado, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Andrew. It is a bit of an out-of-body experience to watch someone introduce you. And so I'll just take it at that and thank Andrew for sharing a basic understanding of who I am and my background, and also to DreamBank Madison for having me. Again, as Andrew said, we were supposed to have done this in person, and because of the circumstances, now we're doing it virtually. And so I'm looking forward to doing this with all of you here today for DreamBank Madison. And I appreciate the opportunity. So as you heard from Andrew, I've had over 30 years of business experience, and it has given me a really good opportunity to work with all kinds of different people. You know, as he said, I worked in corporate America. I've been an entrepreneur for over 20 years. I also had a podcast for 4 years. I've been a market researcher. So I've been in the room with a lot of respondents. I've interacted with a lot of people over all these years. And over this time, I find that I'm engaging with people from so many different backgrounds, everything from people who work on an assembly line in a factory to office workers to CEOs. And so you have to be sort of flexible in how you communicate and work with people from all kinds of different backgrounds and with many different communication styles. And so I find that the key thing about, being able to make that go smoothly is, first of all, knowing about your own communication style and knowing what you're good at and what you're potentially not good at, but also being able to pick up clues from other people. And I think that helps make sure that you enjoy your work, quite frankly. I sort of have a underground foundation belief that you should enjoy your work and that you should enjoy anything that you're involved in, whether it's a committee that you're involved in a volunteer capacity or something in your community, as well as working with your colleagues. That can all be made more fun if you understand a little bit more about how to work with people and to adjust to the different scenarios that you get put in. I know that I have found that that's easier for me now that I have a little bit of insight. And so that's what's exciting to me about sharing this with you, is I think that what we talk about today can help you both professionally and personally, because I think it has a broad application, and I'll give you some stories that show you that in my own life. I like to help people work efficiently together because I think that it's important to understand that every team and every scenario requires people that bring different strengths. And with different strengths comes sometimes different communication styles. And so I like to help organizations and clients that I work with to give them some tools so that they learn how to be ready to work with teams and groups in a complementary way. As you've likely seen within your own family even, as well as any groups or teams that you're on, you're going to be bringing different skills. And as a leader, it's important to be really tuned into this. So if you're leading any committees, if you're leading any teams at work, this is particularly important to be able to have some tools at your disposal. And one of the things that I think also this helps is just to bring more joy to your work. If you're not continually feeling sort of friction with the people that you're working with, it can make things easier and more fun, and it uses your team dynamics to your advantage rather than having them take away from the end product. As I'm sure you know, there's been a lot of research that's been done on teams and what makes them work. And I think you've probably also had the experience of having the unspoken tension that can come when a team isn't really communicating well. If you're a leader, it's really important that you understand how to work through that. And if you're a team member, you're hoping that someone steps up and helps make that better. And so I think it's really important and helpful for us to all have some tools at our disposal. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today. Getting that first slide going is always good. All right, so this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the benefits of having this tool available to learn the work styles of your team members. Some of you may be familiar with this tool. It's called DISC. And as Andrew said in his introduction, when I work with people, I do a custom DISC. You're going to get a little bit of an insight today. And without going through the custom DISC assessment, I'm going to be able to give you enough that you can pretty much get a sense of what your style is and what the teammates around you, what their style is. And so if you've had a DISC assessment, this is going to build on that. If you haven't had one, don't worry about it, because I'm going to walk you through so that you're still going to know what we're going to be working with here today. So I'm going to give you some clues on how to assess your coworkers and your team members, as well as yourself and even some family members, which is a fun part of this, is that you probably inevitably will have some family members come to mind as we talk about the different styles. Now, we can't have a live discussion today as it shows in the outline, but I'm really counting on all of you to use the chat to be able to weigh in. I'm going to ask you sometimes to tell me your thoughts and to tell me what you're thinking your assessment is from our conversation today. So I really hope that you'll use it. I can't see all of you nodding, and so the chat will help me get a sense of what you're connecting with and what insights you're getting from our conversation today. So please feel free to use it. Should we change our slide here? So what are the benefits of having this ability to observe, to identify communication styles? What I like about what we're going to talk about today is that you don't have to know someone. You can observe some of their patterns and their behaviors. You don't have to know anything about their private life. You can pretty much, I'm going to give you some things that you can see for yourself, even having just met someone. And I think that what's important for this is that sometimes we can project expectations or a narrative onto someone because of, sad to say, the way they dress or the position that they hold. That is not helpful. And so I'm going to give you a chance to work with what they say and how they act as a way for you to understand what their communication style is, rather than other kind of clues that you might tend to want to create a story about. The other thing I like is that behavior is harder to fit to how people want to be perceived. You know, you sort of are who you are. And on one sense, you sometimes do change your behavior depending on who you're with. Having said that, if you watch someone enough in a meeting or over a number of different circumstances, you're going to have enough data to see what their behavior is on a fairly consistent basis. And it makes it harder to kind of bluff your way through the assessment if you look at the behaviors. I'm going to call myself out on some of those things because some of those things about me are really easy to identify. So our goal today is that I want to give you more insight into the communication style so that can lead to smoother conversations. That's the whole thing. Let's make some of those conversations have less misunderstanding, and maybe you can understand people a little bit more if you know some of the things that we're going to talk about today. And that is that you're going to also feel that not only do you know your own communication style, but you're going to respect the fact that everyone has a different communication style. That doesn't make it wrong, as I've said here. There isn't a style that's right or wrong. And in fact, as you probably know, every team needs a different perspective on things. And so this isn't about deciding what's right or wrong. It's understanding what you can do and how those styles interact, because we're going to talk about that as well. We're going to identify how we can look at the improving how the styles interact. And this is particularly important for leaders because this helps develop a stronger connection and more trust, which is really important to helping a leader really get their teams humming. And I will come back to the fact that it's really hard, or it's really important that you be honest about yourself. It doesn't help you if you say, no, I'm not that, when you are. And it's really better to just be honest about what your communication style is and what you're comfortable with. And the key thing about that is that the more you know yourself, as Andrew said in my introduction, I really believe in this, the more that you know yourself, the better you're going to be able to see others. If you're not being honest with yourself, you're not going to be able to see others honestly. So please own sort of whatever style is yours, and then we're going to talk about how to work with that and what to watch for if you're ready to kind of look at that and how you can be the best member of a team that you can be. So this DISC assessment that I keep referencing, some of you may be familiar with it. It is an acknowledged kind of assessment that's used by companies, HR departments. You may have also heard of Myers-Briggs. There is a Gallup Strengths Assessment. I mean, there are so many assessments. I am not here to tell you, good or bad, right or wrong. People connect with different assessments. I really like this one. This is the one that I have found is easiest for people to understand, easiest for people to remember, and has, to me, the most applicability in life, not just in work, which I think is another added bonus of DISC. And I like what we're going to talk about today because you can observe this one. This isn't about someone answering questions and assessment. You can observe this. And so this DISC behavior assessment, the background of this I think is really interesting, which is that it came out of a theory of by psychologist William Moulton. I'm going to get his name wrong. William Moulton Marston. And he wrote about these different work styles, and then Walter Clark designed this assessment tool that is what came of the DISC. And what's a really interesting side note of William Moulton Marston, that's a bit of a mouthful, he published this book in 1928 called Emotions of Normal People, and that's how he created these 4 different archetypes of styles. And as an aside, he is the person who developed the character Wonder Woman when he used the pen name Charles Moulton. And so I think that's a nice background. He obviously looked at people's archetypes and personalities a lot in his writing as well. So when Walter Clark put this assessment tool together, he was able to take these 2 together and make it into this DISC analysis. Coaches use it. Like I said, HR directors use it. It's a good self-awareness tool for understanding performance and teams. As I said, there's other options, but the DISC one relies on behavior, which I really appreciate because it's just easier to use as an assessment tool. And what is a key part of this is that the interaction of the styles is an important part of it. It's one thing to exist in your own bubble with your style, or to have another team member or family member who is working with their own style, but it's how the 2 interact that can create the magic or make it tragic. In that there are some styles that if you don't take the time to get to understand those, it can lead to a lot of frustration. And it's not through anything that either party is doing intentionally. It's just that the styles need to understand and appreciate the way that they each speak. So what I want to do is I'm going to show you 4 different descriptions of people who might be coworkers or team members, people on committees that you've been on, people in your community, maybe even in your family. We're going to go through 4, and I want you to maybe take some notes to yourself. And in fact, I think I think that Andrew was going to put in the chat a Google Drive link where you can download a page that I designed for you to take notes on today. There we go. Thank you, Andrew. If you can see in the chat, there's a link to a Google Drive. That is just a sheet that I've designed for you to be able to take notes if you'd like. Because as we go through this, you might want to take notes, not just for your own style, but for the styles of the other people that you're going to be working with. So we're going to look at 4 different styles, and I want you to reflect. Do you feel like that reflects you? Do you feel like that's anyone you know? Does that remind you of someone that you've worked with in the past or that you work with currently? And then after the 4, we're going to do a little bit of a reflection and look at those more closely. Okay? So the first one, okay, this is person 1. Okay? They are task focused. They talk about data a lot. They have a strong personality. They want to lead. They are a person who steps up and wants to lead as part of a team or in a room. They speak loud and they sometimes speak fast. And they tend to make big gestures when they speak. Okay? So think about if that feels like you, sounds like you, or someone you know. All right, number 2. Person number 2 is people-focused. They discuss feelings. They use wide gestures. They also gesture. That's what they have in common with the first person. They speak fast and sometimes loud, and they are influence-driven. Okay? So that's person number 2. Does any of that resonate with you? Feel familiar to you? Have you observed that behavior before? Okay, person number 3, also people-focused, like respondent number 2. They discuss feelings. They are connection-driven. They make more narrow gestures, and they speak slower and often softer. Okay, so there's some similarities there from some of the prior people, and there are some differences there. Okay. Respondent 4, person 4, is task focus. They also discuss data, like person number 1 did. They are excellence driven. They tend to have more narrow gestures when they speak, and they speak soft and often slow. Okay, so those are the 4. Maybe you've made some notes to yourself, and hopefully you have come to some thought about what behavior style is closest to yours. If you have, put it in the chat. Feel free to put it in the chat so I can get a sense of maybe what the collective of some of you out there are experiencing in terms of your observations about yourself. Or if you're recognizing the styles of colleagues or, past bosses, current bosses, family members, or friends, hopefully. And I'm going to continue to give you information, but that's a good foundation for what some of those styles are. All right. Oh, I just saw someone say they're a 1. Okay. All right, good. Well, I'll keep watching the chat and see if more of you have come to a decision yet about who you are or some of your team members. But let's look a little bit closer at this. So let's apply this to the DISC model that we talked about, that we're going to cover today. Oh, I see that we got a couple 1s. Okay, possibly a 4. Okay, good. All right, a 2. Good. All right, so these are left to right, 1, 2 on the top, and then bottom 3 and 4. Okay, so let's go look at these a little closer and then see if you feel like you still feel in alignment with that particular style. Okay, as I tell you more about these. So as you can see, the D is task focused. They're about getting things done. They talk about the data. Where are we at? Okay, they are significance driven in that, they like to be a leader, frankly. They like to have an important place in the room. They make wide gestures, and they speak loud and sometimes fast. Okay. I's, people focused. They're about, how do you feel about this? Are you feeling okay about us moving forward on this? They're less about the task as a D. They're more about making sure that they're in tune with the feelings of everyone. They're influence driven. They make wide gestures as well, and they speak fast and sometimes loud. And then C is task focused. They also discuss data like the D's do. They're excellence driven. They want it to be right. And they tend to make narrow gestures, speak more softly and more slow. And S is people focused like the I. As you can see, the two, if you're noticing this, the two on the right are people focused, and they tend to be about feelings. Okay. But they have other things that are different about them. The two on the left, task focused and discuss data. Okay. So that hopefully you've kind of got it narrowed down now to whether you're a D, an I, an S, or a C. I'm seeing in the chat a little bit of a mix. We've got some 1s, some 4s, and so let's keep building on this. Now, as I said on the bottom, as you can see, you can be a combination. I don't want to imply that you're all one or all another. Some of us are all one or all another, but you can be a combination. But I think it's important to identify which one you think you are most like, because that helps to just give you some general guidance. It's hard to be kind of in the middle and know necessarily how you feel. And what's also important is sometimes you do adapt to circumstances. There are times where you recognize your role in a room, on a team, and you know that you have to modulate some of your natural responses. Okay, so let's look a little bit more at these. And I know that some of this writing is a little, but this kind of shows you the application of the disc, taking what was on the prior page and really highlighting the fact that this is this disc system. And you'll hear different words for those letters. The ones that I'm generally going to use today are dominance or dominator, and I is usually influencer, and the S tends to be steadiness. C is conscientiousness. Again, you'll see some different interpretations of that being used, but those are some of the words that we're going to be using today. And as I said, as you can see, the two styles on the right tend to be, as you can see on the bottom, they're more narrow gestures. They speak slower and softer, okay? The two on the left tend to have wider gestures, and they can speak faster and louder, okay? But then when we look at the D and the C, they both are about tasks and about data. The I and the S tend to be about feelings and about people, okay? So there's some similarities and some differences there. All right, hopefully this is giving you some more insight for yourself and your team. So here's some other things to think about that might, if you're on the fence about either yourself or someone else, maybe some of these things can help. So let's look at the dominance, the D, which is that they are to the point, they command action, they discuss deadlines. Remember, they're very task focused. So they're about how are we going to hit this deadline? How are we going to get this done? They want to lead, and they are driven, focused, and confident. Okay, think about someone in your life or that's in the public eye that might be a D, that might embody those qualities. All right. Again, these are things you can observe. Remember, this isn't about reading their minds or understanding necessarily their motivations. This is about behaviors that you've seen. All right, the I, constant body movement. They tend to be very kinetic. They tend to be optimistic. They're the team member who will tend to be able to say, we can get this done. We're going to work this out. Okay. They discuss people and feelings, which we talked about. They tend to make eye contact. They're very engaged with people. I think we talked earlier about the fact that they are very, they're about connections with people, and they tend to be outgoing, engaging, and enthusiastic. All right. And so the C. The C is the conscientious. Well, actually, let's go to the S. The S is steadiness. So they are an attentive listener. Think about people you know who have been attentive listeners. They discuss agreement. So they discuss agreement among team members. They ask how questions. How are we going to get this done? And they use words like you and we and not I. Okay? They tend to be about the team. They're patient, reliable, and service-oriented. Okay, they're steadiness. And the C, the conscientiousness, they pause before speaking. They ask why questions. They ask for agreement. So they want to have agreement among the team. They tend to be very detailed, deliberate, and careful. So again, is this telling you anything different? Does any of this change your mind about who you feel like, you are, or who you feel like some of the people on your team are? And I think that one of the other things I'm going to assume, and that I'm going to encourage you to assume that everyone on your team is coming there with the best of intentions and that they're there to support the team and the overall effort, but that they're doing it in a different way. So the person who is being the attentive leader and discussing agreement, attentive listener and discussing agreement, is bringing different qualities to the team than someone who is the D and is to the point and wants to discuss the deadlines. Okay, they're both coming with good intentions of getting the work done. They're just taking it from different perspectives. So if you assume that they're coming with good intent, you can understand, however, how those styles might clash, right? There are some things about those styles that seem to have different, perspectives or motivations when they're sitting around a table. All right, so I will encourage you, if you have any questions, to put those in the chat. And I would ask you, are you surprised by any of this? Did any of those descriptions tell you something about yourself that you didn't know? And I'm seeing a question that says, I feel like I cycle through each of these based on my teammates' communication styles. That can be true. Sit back and think about, if you walk into a room with a blank slate, which one do you think you are? And frankly, it's great if you can adapt. If you've got someone who you can see really has something inspiring that's going to help lead the team, and if you can dial back on your own qualities in order to make that happen, that's maturity, and that's a really great professional skill. But you'll also you don't want to be that fluid. You want to make sure that you are anchored in understanding what is your core style and what are you bringing to the team, because there are times where the team is going to flounder without your style. Whether you're the I or you're the D or you're the C or the S, you're bringing something important. And so you want to make sure that you are anchored in, here are the strengths that I'm bringing. All right. So I actually want to go back for a second. So let's think about that. I want to build on that for a second, because so what might a D bring to a team that would be a real benefit to the team? Okay, what they generally bring is that they are going to be a leader who's going to get the team to the deadline. Okay, they're going to make sure that they have action steps in place, that they are focused on getting this thing across the finish line, being ready for that presentation, being ready for that that launch, that product launch. They're going to be ones that will help make that happen. Okay, the I tends to be someone who is going to keep the spirits of the group up. They tend to be optimistic. They're very tuned in to the people on the team, making sure that they're feeling appreciated, making sure that they're feeling confident, and they're very engaging and enthusiastic, and they're going to kind of be a bit of the emotional fuel, so to speak, to keep everyone up during the process. The S is attentive listener. They want to make sure that there's agreement. So where the D might be focused on the deadline, the S will want to make sure that everyone is feeling like they're a part of the team. They're going to use words like we and you, and they're very sort of reliable and attentive to everyone on the team in a different way than the I, in that the I does still want to get things done. The S is more about the agreement among the team. The C is very detailed oriented. This is someone, for example, who might be an engineer or a scientist. They are very about the details. They ask why questions, like, why are we doing that? They take their time before speaking. And so they are, some people want to focus on the big picture, like the D. The C wants to focus on the details. And if you're not a detail person, you want a C on your team. If you're launching a product and there's many moving parts to that, there's all kinds of processes that have to take place for that to happen, and you don't want to miss some of the details, you want a C on your team. Now, what are the shadow sides of some of these styles? Because we have to look at that too, because as a leader, you're not just looking for the positive things that someone can bring to a team, you're also looking for the things that as a leader you need to be paying attention to and managing and or modulating, okay? So a D, as much as they want to get to the deadline, what did it say about their style? They're not as tuned in to people's feelings. They're task focused and they're driven by data. So they are not as tuned in to if someone is feeling slighted on the team. So that's something as a leader you want to watch for. And I have coached a couple of Ds, and it is something that they always have to make sure that they're watching for. Is you do have to make sure that you're paying attention to how the team is feeling, not just about hitting the deadline. So that's important if you're a D, to make sure that you're paying attention. They can be intimidating. They can speak loud, and they sometimes speak fast. That can be intimidating. And a lot of Ds need to know that they can be intimidating. And with the best of intentions, they don't want to shut down the other team members, but they have to know that that's a possibility with their personal style. With an I, the downside is they can also be intimidating. They speak fast, so they can be hard to keep up with, and they can sometimes be loud. But they also are tuned into people's feelings and focused on, getting everyone up and inspired. But they don't pay attention to the details. They're much more about keeping things going and making sure that everyone's feeling excited and that everyone is feeling motivated. And so they need to sometimes be slowed down to pay attention to the details. I will confess to you that I am an I. I am a great member of the team to keep everyone excited and inspired, but I can speak a little fast if I'm not paying attention. And I'm not always great at details. Sometimes I am, but I'm not always. So I appreciate a C on the team who's paying attention to details. So let's look at the S. So the S is someone who deeply cares about everyone on the team and deeply cares about making sure that everyone feels included and that everyone is feeling positive about the work that they're doing together. Because they speak slower and often softer, they can be very intimidated by Ds and Is. So you have to be careful of that and make sure that if you're a leader, that an S is getting time to speak. Because I also do market research and moderate sessions, I have to watch for people who are S's and who aren't going to always command the floor, but have really important things to say. As a leader, you have to make sure that you're paying attention to who the S's are in the room and making sure that they're still feeling included and good about what's going on and giving them time to speak, because they're noticing things in the room that the D isn't noticing, because the D isn't tuned into necessarily. They're so focused on the task, they're not tuned into the other people. The S is, and they'll be able to pick up on things and help you out with that. The C is, again, your engineer or scientist. Often they're about the data, the challenges. They are, as you can see on this slide, excellence driven. They want to get it right, and they don't actually care about how long that might take. So you have to make sure that if you're a leader, you're keeping the C aware of the pace of what needs to be happening. It's amazing that they can take all the time to dig into the data and really come to conclusions that no one else might be able to come to. But it might, as you can imagine, frustrate some of the other team members if they're so tied up in the data. And again, they speak softly and often slow. So for the D's and the I's who speak fast and sometimes loud, the C's can easily be intimidated and they won't always ask for a chance to speak. You as a leader need to be tuned into this to make sure that you give them that time to speak. And you don't want the person who's crunching that data and who is doing that detail work to be shut down. So as a leader, you want to pay attention to that. Okay, so that's an overview of some of the positives and some of the challenges of some of these different styles. Does that give you guys some more insight? And for the person who said that sometimes they base it on their team, I totally understand. When I'm on a team with a D, sometimes you want to let the D, take that lead and be in the spotlight and drive to the answer because you know that that's actually what the team needs right now. But there are other times where I know that the team desperately needs what the C has to bring and needs this person who's really sticking to the details of the project. And I have to really suppress any of my natural tendencies to make sure that that person gets the chance to do what they bring to the team. And that's, again, maturity and that's professionalism to be able to do that. And so as a leader, you need to watch out for that. All right. So I want to add another way for you to remember this in case you don't think you're going to remember if you're a D or an I or an S or a C or what your team members are. I want to pull some information from a book called Taking Flight. It's a book that you're welcome to read, but I'm going to give you kind of the Cliff Notes on it. I think they do a great job of personifying the DISC system and in a way that I think is really easy to remember. As you can see on the right, there's that same grid, right? The DISC. And as you can see, the top two are verbal and fast-paced, right? The D and the I, they tend to talk loud and fast. The two on the bottom, it says reserved and even pace. They tend to be more modulated in how much they speak and how loudly they speak. The two on the left, you can see on the grid, are both task-oriented. The D and the C are task-oriented. They're about getting it done. And the two on the right are more people-focused. They're about making sure that the team is getting along, and they're really unhappy when the team is not getting along. All right? And so this is a great way to remember this DISC system if you personify these into birds, okay? What do we know about the eagle? The eagle is really the king of the forest, if you think about it. They kind of soar above, right? They're the big picture. They're sort of like, they're not down in the details. They're not down on the floor of the forest. They're up above. They're making sure that everything is going smoothly and hitting the deadlines. They're not as much about how to make that happen. They're just about making sure that they get it done. That's the eagle. So when you try to remember what a D is, it's an eagle. They own the forest. Okay. What is true of an I? They tend to be optimistic, engaging, they tend to be extroverts. What symbolizes that is a parrot. Okay. The influencer, the I, is a parrot. Why? Because parrots are colorful, they're charismatic, they can talk a lot. And so this is a great way to remember the I. As we've discussed, this parrot and their colorful nature and them talking all the time can be a bit intimidating, but hopefully that will help you remember what the I is. That's a parrot, colorful and engaging. Okay, what do we know about the S? Steadiness, supportive. Okay, a dove. Okay, a dove is representative of the S because the S is very much the person who's paying attention to the people and the feelings in the group. They want everyone to get along. And the C is the conscientiousness person on the team, the conscientious person on the team. And that is the owl. What do we know about owls? We refer to them as a wise owl, right? They are about the details. They are fastidious. They don't mind doing the details. In fact, they love doing the details, and they'll do it regardless of what the timeline is. So the owl is the one that you go to if you want to put together a plan to get your project done. All right. So versus the dove saying, can't we all just get along? The C is like, wait, I have to make sure that I get this right. Okay. And so I'd love to hear if this is resonating with any of you, but this really can help you observe these scenarios from a different perspective. So let me give you a couple examples that and I'm going to share them from my own family. I don't know if my family members are on this call, but I'll share these because when I read this book and I learned more about DISC, I saw this play out over and over. And I'm hoping that when you leave our talk today, you're going to be able to see things in a new way, and you'll probably see them play out differently. So as I said, I am an I. I'm about sort of keeping things moving, being an optimist, being enthusiastic part of the team. And I have a husband and a daughter who are both engineers. So they are both about the details. They are brilliant. You want them on your team because they are as smart as can be. They know how to put together a plan. They like to build things. They do things that I can't do. It's really amazing. And I have a daughter who is an S, who is the peace dove. And so I saw this play out because at one point I was playing, if you've played the game Settlers of Catan, I don't know if any of you have, but I was playing Settlers of Catan soon after I was starting to put this talk together. And I was playing with my owl husband and my peace dove daughter. And while we were playing this game, I wanted to move along. And so after I would have my turn, I would move the die to the next person so that the next person would be ready to go. And when it comes to my turn, I know what I'm going to do. I've already thought about what my move is. And so after my husband rolled at one point, I moved the die to my other daughter. And he looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, you just rolled. You don't need the die." "I know, but I'm still thinking." I said, "I know, but how? You don't need the die anymore. I'm just trying to keep things moving." And he said, "Don't rush me through my turn. I have to decide what my move is." And I said, "How have you not thought about what your move is?" Well, all of a sudden I realized he's a C. He's an owl. He needs to make sure that he looks at the details in every scenario and make the right move. It was frustrating the heck out of me, I got to tell you. But as soon as I had that insight, and that's why I'm so passionate about sharing this with other people, as soon as I had that insight, I thought, Chris, you need to just dial back and not worry about the pace of the game. You need to just let him make the decision in his own time, because otherwise it's going to be miserable for me and it's going to be miserable for him. So as we were discussing this, my other daughter is watching this and saying, "Guys, come on, stop arguing. I don't want to see you argue." And I realized, well, she wants everyone to get along. So this was making her really uncomfortable because she was watching us debate about why he wasn't going faster. So that might be a silly example, but it was so representative to me of how you see these scenarios play out. If you've ever been in a team meeting with someone who is, in charge of production or something like that, which I have in the past, they want to go through all the details of how that's going to happen. And I remember as a marketing person when I was in corporate America, being so frustrated that we weren't just talking about things and moving through things faster. If you know about yourself that you're a D or an I, you need to make sure that when you're with someone who is a C, you're giving them the time that they need. And so that was a great insight for me when I saw that happen. And I share that with you so that hopefully you can sort of see that play out in your own life. All right. Again, share with me in the chat if you know that you're an eagle, a parrot, a dove, or an owl. Anyone see their spouses in this? I can tell you this, it can help you have so much more patience. Now, one of the things that's also clear is when you're with another person of your same style, you can either rub each other the wrong way or completely indulge in being with someone who's like you. When I'm with another parrot, it's electric. When I'm with another eye, it's electric because we're both enthusiastic and we're both, optimistic and we're both excited about getting something done. The problem is then no one's paying attention to the details. Okay, good. I'm seeing a dove, an owl, an eagle. Okay, spouse is a parrot. Okay, so this is good. All right. Parrots, I'm telling you, you have to be very aware of talking too much and overpowering your partner. I have a C partner. My husband is a C. I have to be very careful about not overpowering him with words because a lot of times for an I, for a parrot, your words can be a lot. And I can tell you, I have some friends who are S's, who are doves, who are quarantined with their parrot spouse. Oh my goodness, that's a lot. It's a lot for them, for the doves or the C's or the owls to be with the parrot because it's a lot of talking. So, and if you're, quarantined with one of these, you probably have seen this up close and personal, right? Okay, good. So, good. We have a good mix on the call, which is great. And if you are able, I see many of you saying what your spouse is. That's fantastic because again, let's make sure we continue to talk about the interaction of the two because it can be a disaster if you're not aware. Being aware of your own style and being aware of the people that you're with is really important. I know with my dove daughter that conflict makes her really uncomfortable. And so we always have to be kind of aware of that. My C daughter will be working on, who's an engineer, a degreed engineer. She will be on a project for hours and hours and hours. There's no need for me to worry about her because that is her favorite place to be. So don't try and, project what is important to you or say to an owl or a dove, well, why don't you talk more? Or why don't you talk louder? It isn't necessarily in their nature. The best thing you can do to help someone is to make them feel comfortable, make them feel safe. Don't try and make them something they aren't. Just have patience for what they are. And by that, I mean, I have to have patience for the two owls in my life. I love them dearly and they are absolutely worth it. But once I realized that part of my issue was that I had to have patience with team members or family members who are owls, it was really helpful to me. So I'm hoping that you can take some of that away from our conversation as well. All right. So one of the things I thought we would do is, I want to give you as many memory devices for this as possible. And so I thought, well, let's take the Friends characters. I would ask for a show of hands, but I'm assuming that you have seen Friends, the show Friends. It was on for 10 years. Many people that I've talked to in quarantine have gone back and watched every season. And so, it's on TV where I am kind of all the time. I watch it before bed sometimes when I'm getting ready for bed. It's on all the time. So many of us know these characters. So I thought, well, let's take the Friends characters and see where they might fall on the disc. So as you can see, we've got the D, eagle. Oh, Amy, I just see Amy put in the chat. She jumped the gun on my first one. So I was going to ask, where would you put Monica? What do you think Monica is? That's my first one, actually, Amy. You read my mind. Pivot. Oh, I'm glad you guys are friendsophiles as much as I am. Yes. So yes, I would make Monica a D. Monica, think about it. She's very focused at the task at hand. She speaks loudly, right? Remember the episode where Elle McPherson was the roommate across the hall and she was making fun of the fact that she could hear her from from the hall, and she was so loud. So Monica speaks loudly. She isn't necessarily tuned into other people's emotions. There are many funny points in the show where she is just completely clueless to the fact that she has said something that sounds so not caring about other people because she's so focused on the task at hand. And so I would definitely make Monica a D. Now, interestingly, Monica's kryptonite is that she wants parents' approval. So, or people who are older than her's approval. So, there are times where she backs off from her D in order to try and kind of get approval with Rachel's mom and with the woman that she catered the funeral for. She falls out of her D position because she deeply wants them to like her, but by all other measures, she is a D. She's very focused on the task at hand. Okay. All right. Where would Rachel fall? Where do you guys think that Rachel would fall on the quadrant? Let me see if any of you can put it in the chat so I can see if it's resonating with you. Okay, I'm gonna tell you. All right, I would make Rachel an S, and the reason is that Rachel really is very emotionally sensitive, very tuned into people's feelings, very much about people getting along. She's a bit childlike in some of that being important to her, more so than about sort of the task at hand. More so than about, sort of deadlines and stuff. That isn't really her strength. She's really a great friend. She cares about other people, and she's very tuned into making sure that people are getting along at the expense of herself sometimes, frankly. So that's where I would put Rachel. I think she's very kind-hearted and a dove as a character. And so I think that helps kind of visualize a little bit more about putting some personification around this disc. So let's finish off the female characters here. Where would you put it, Phoebe? She's a little bit more tricky, but I would love to know where you guys think we would put Phoebe. Okay. I would put Phoebe as an S, but as you can see, she's closer to the middle because I don't think she's as much of a pure S or dove as Rachel is. And the reason being that I think that Phoebe is an S because, she's this vegetarian, and she, especially in the early episodes, she's very much into sort of like, new age thing. She's, not about money. She's a massage therapist. She sort of, is also a good friend. She, though, can be a little more sort of task focused than Rachel. So I put her a little closer to the center. But I think in general, she's more of an S. She tends to be a supportive person in the room rather than sort of a person who is sort of taking the lead. I would say she is less of a pure character. I would say that she's much more of a blend. I see someone said that she's an I. She's got a little bit of I in the episode where Monica doesn't want to talk to the woman whose funeral she catered because she's too afraid to ask for payment. Who steps in? Phoebe does. And Phoebe says, I'm going to go ask for payment. So Phoebe has a little bit of she can kind of take on the other characteristics a little bit more than, for example, Rachel. Rachel is more of a pure S, whereas I think Phoebe is a little bit more fluid in terms of the situations that she's in. So I wouldn't say that she's necessarily a C or an owl, but I think she has shown examples of being a DI and an S, but I would give her primarily the S. She's a bit of a non-confrontational person. Or character, I should say. So let's look at the male members of the cast. All right. So where would you put Ross? Ross is a pretty straightforward one. So let's see what you think. If you can put in the chat what you think, I'd love to know if this one seems clear to you guys. Okay, let me give you some clues. Ross is a scientist, right? He's a professor. And so what does that make him most likely to be? Again, this is my unscientific analysis, but yes, Abby just put in the chat C, Anna just put in the chat C. Yes, I would put Ross as a C because, again, he can be a little clueless about, people and feelings, more so about sort of being right. What is the data? He hates not being right. C's are excellence driven. They will take as much time as they can to get it right. What is one of his biggest regrets in life? That he's had 3 marriages, right? So he likes to be right. So a C is very much like the character Ross. Ross is not quite as isolated as sometimes some scientists. That's why I've got him closer to center and not purely to the left. But I would definitely say that of the 4, Ross is a C, and all of you in the chat got it right. So that's great. That means that I've explained it well, so that makes me happy. All right, so what do you think about Joey? Where would you put Joey? What qualities stand out with Joey that would give you a clue to where we might put him? Again, this is unscientific, but if anything can help you remember these, I wanted to share some of these with you. All right, so where would we put Joey? Okay. What is Joey's key slogan? How you doing, right? So Joey's about people, right? He is about, he's, a big personality. He's likable. I've got him fairly far over to the edge because he's very much about people and feelings and, engaging people. And so I think that he is a good example of an I. He is a bit of a colorful character as well, I would say. And so I would make him an I. And then we've got one more. Our last character is Chandler. Where would you put Chandler on the grid? Again, Chandler is not as pure. I think he's got some combination, but I think there are some things about Chandler that that would make me lean. I would tend toward making him also an I. Now, I've put him closer to center because the truth is with Chandler's job, he has to be about data. And so he is a little bit less. Yeah, I agree. I think he's closer to center. But I would say that he is probably closer to right in the center. He has to be a little bit about data, but he doesn't love it. People who are C's really like the detail and really like the data. Chandler does it because it's part of his job, because it helps him get paid. But he tends to be sort of, he's always got a joke to tell. He's always got a funny story. He tells jokes to help make people feel comfortable. So he is a fairly social character in the show, not as sensitive as, for example, a Rachel. And certainly not the kind of a D that a Monica is. So I would say his primary quality would probably be an I, but I would agree that he's probably closer to center because I think he kind of fits the circumstances. And particularly because he ends up married to a D, that probably, makes him even more closer to center because he has to be sort of a secondary personality then. So. All right. So does this provide some additional perspective on some of the work styles and the communication styles? Again, this is not exact, but I think it hopefully can help you with some interpretation when you think about the people in your life. In fact, what I would hope is, and I would ask is, as a takeaway from our conversation today, make a list of some of the key people that you interact with, family members, neighbors, people you serve on committees with, people at work. And when you sit with this, see if you can come up with what you think is their lead categorization in the DISC system. What quality, and make a list, what qualities jump out to you. And again, this isn't about sort of having a story about who they are or a narrative. What do you observe in them? start with simple things like, do they tend to speak frequently or not? Do they tend to speak loudly or not? Do they tend to be about paying attention to other people's feelings? You know, do they, or are they more about sort of, you know, what are we doing when, and, you know, when are we leaving, and how are we going to get that done, kind of a thing. Those are the very simple things that you can look at to try and categorize people. And so I think the thing that is the truth I have to tell you right now, which is that's the easy part, is learning this categorization part thing. Now, the hard part is that it's more important that you as a team leader learn to see the opportunities for synergy and connection, or the opportunities for misunderstanding and even conflict. Honestly, if you come into a situation in the near future where you can see conflict in the context of these personalities, these work styles, it would make me so happy, because, you know, sometimes you say, why can't these two get along? Well, break it down. Think about what's going on with their potential different communication styles and work styles. What can you do to be a bridge to help make sure that that becomes an asset and not a point of conflict that can tie things up? And yeah, I mean, Andrew just said, if you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. Because I think this is really the secret sauce of how you give legs to what we're learning today, which is how can you take this into situations at work or at home or in other situations you're in, and see some of the conflicts in a new way, and see some of the opportunities in a new way. See some things in some of those people that they're not seeing, because they're just so distracted by the fact that they feel so different from the other people. Okay. And so I think that the key thing to think about is that I want you to think about how you can use this as a consideration for using this in your work. Okay. And I want to stop for a second because I see there's a question. Is there a strong gender difference within the 4 categories? Is there pretty even spread? That's a really good question. And I'm not sure that I have seen a study that looks at that. I can tell you from my personal experience, I think that there is a tendency to assume that D's might be male, but I will tell you that I've done this talk with, and I've done this workshop with groups of women, and there are just as many D's in the women as there are in the men. I think some of it depends on professions. For example, you know, is there more likelihood to be a certain type of style among teachers? Is there a certain amount of style among nurses? Is there a certain amount of style among construction workers? Maybe, maybe not. I don't have scientific information on that, but I think that's a really good thing to reflect on. I think some of it is stuff that you're born with. Some of it is, excuse me, conditional to your environment, in that sometimes if you spend a lot of time with an introvert, you might have more of a tendency to talk more because you're kind of keeping the conversation going. Vice versa, if you spend time, or for example, were raised with parents who spoke a lot and who were either I's or D's, you might have taken on some of the tendencies of being a little more quiet just because that was a survival strategy. This is frankly a great opportunity to think about that, Tina, is, you know, how much of it is gender based, how much of it is profession based, how much of it is socialized. And I know that I have, because I'm married to an owl, I have to be very cognizant of how much I speak and to make sure that I don't speak too much, because when I'm with S's and C's, I have to be very conscious of making sure that I speak slower and make time for them to speak, because that can be a real weakness both for D's and for I's. But for C's and S's, I've coached people in those categorizations, and I had one of them say to me, I sit in meetings and I don't think anyone even knows that I'm there. And I challenged her to go into every meeting and find a way to ask at least one question. Challenge yourself, if you're a C or an S, to make sure that you're not intimidated to not speak. I say this to everyone, your voice is important in the room that you're in. Whether you're bringing your different work style or communication style, whether you're bringing the background that you have, the experience that you have, your voice is important. Don't let anything convince you otherwise. So if you're a C or an S, I might need to invite you to make sure that you raise a question in every meeting that you're in, or make sure that you think about something that you can ask of a D or an I that will make that work style less intimidating for you if it has been intimidating. You bring an important aspect to your team. And so make sure that you feel confident about that. So, but you've given me a good question about gender differences, Tina. I'm going to go after this search and find out if there is any research on who tends to fall where. So thank you for the question. Please keep them coming. So let's go back to, if you're a leader, so I guess the question would be, who might be the best person to call on first in a meeting? Okay. Well, what are the ramifications of that? If you call on because I'm faced with this all the time, because I'm a market researcher as well. So I am in rooms with all kinds of people, or if I'm, interviewing people, or if I'm doing this as a workshop and I'm in a room full of people, who's the best person to call on first? Well, what are the ramifications? If you call on a D first, they can come across really strong, and they might intimidate without even knowing it. They might seem to sort of, own the room and intimidate some of the C's and S's that are there. If you call on an I first, they will certainly be engaging and optimistic. They could also be intimidating, but they will for sure be an up. They tend to be an up energetic addition to be the first person to call on in a meeting. If you call on an S first, that's a really great way of endorsing them and supporting them, giving them the floor first. Every time that you give the floor to an S, that's a really good show of support for an S, because they aren't going to necessarily ask for that themselves. If you call on a C first, one of the things that you need to make sure that you know is that a C can pause before they speak. If you remember, that was one of the qualities. They often pause before they speak because they want to make sure what they say is right. So if you call on a C first, be prepared for the fact that they may take a little time. Don't lose patience with that. If they take a moment to gather their thoughts, be okay with that. Okay? Be okay with the fact that they're going to take a little bit of time to respond. It's not bad. It's not wrong. It's just the way that they communicate. And you want to be supportive of that. So again, the second question, what do you need to watch for when a C speaks? All right. A C can get mired in details. They can take more time to communicate. They're very deliberate. So you need to make sure that you give them plenty of space. Don't call on them when you're running late or you're running behind and make them feel rushed. That's going to make them feel very uncomfortable, and they're not going to feel safe to share what they have to share. What you do need to watch for as a C is supporting them if they do tend to get sidetracked and keeping them moving along. So you might want to say, can I ask you, so where are we at on that then? Have them bring it to a fine point, because they won't necessarily naturally do that. They'll want to share all the details of a project, and where you may not want all the details. So even your prompt of them could give them that kind of guidance and say, listen, give us a top line. What are we looking at here? That will help us see, hopefully, keep their comments focused when they would tend to get too much into the details. Okay. Again, so what can you do to make an S feel more comfortable and relaxed? Again, give them the floor, affirm their comments, not in an inauthentic way, but when I'm with a group and I know that someone who is an S comments, I'll say, that's really good input, or that's really valuable input, or thanks for bringing that to our attention, because they kind of need to sometimes feel that their input is just as valuable. All right. And so then I think the key question also becomes, so what do you need to be particularly aware of? Oh, let me go back, because I didn't talk about a D here. So what about if you're a leader and you have a D on your team? You need to be ready to manage them, because Ds can tend to really have the big idea in mind and want to focus on deadlines and not necessarily be attuned to what's going on with the other people in the room. And as the leader, you want to make sure that you're always calling them back to that and saying, I think before we do that, we need to make sure we hear from the C. Obviously not calling them the C, but in order to not use a gender or label on who that C might be, you might want to say to the D, hey, let's wait and make sure that we hear what they have to say before we rush to that conclusion. It is your job to make sure that you modulate some of that behavior of the shadow side of some of these work styles, because people are counting on you to do that. How many times have you been in a meeting where in your head you're thinking, oh my gosh, why aren't they telling that person to be quiet? Oh my gosh, am I the only one that is really annoyed by the fact that this person keeps talking constantly? We've all been in that situation, both personally and at work. And so keep that in mind to give you the confidence you need as a leader to step in and to, take control and modulate some of the behavior that needs to be modulated. So let's talk about what you need to be aware of in your own style, because this is really important. You need to, here's the things you need to be cautious of. So if you're a D, you need to be conscious of the fact that you might be so rushing to the answer that you're not attuned to what's going on. And I would say this about all of the styles, because one of the workshops that I did, a couple of the people in the workshop told me that they were aware of their weaknesses, and they had asked friends or colleagues to tell them if there was something that they did that was not appropriate or out of line in a meeting. The two people that told me this in particular were Ds, and they said that they asked colleagues of theirs to tell them. And so then after a meeting, they would say, you talked right over so-and-so, or you didn't pause before you made a decision on that. You didn't listen to what the other team members had to say. And so it's great if you feel confident that you can ask for the assistance of either a colleague or a boss or whoever. Or if you're working with a coach, ask a coach to kind of help you with that, so that you can become a little more sensitized to some of the things that you as a leader might have as a weakness. And in particular, again, Ds are great leaders. They feel absolutely natural as a leader, whereas an S doesn't feel natural as a leader, because they're very worried about sort of making sure everyone's getting along, and they're not as focused on the data and the deadline. A D is, a D is a great leader of a team, unless they are intimidating and shutting down everyone else on the team. So if you're a D, you need to make sure that you're sensitive to that. An I can be a great leader of a team if they stay focused on the deadline. The I's are not always as focused. They can be sort of so caught up in being enthusiastic and cheerleading and all that they can lose sight of that. But they can be, as long as they leave room for the other people to talk, because the I's can tend to, their charisma and their persona can kind of become an entity in and of itself. And so if you're an I, you need to be sensitive about that and making sure that you remember you're just a part of the team, and you need to make sure that you're leaving room for the other team members. Now, if you're an S, now let's say you have an employee that is an S. Let me give you an example of, so I just said Ds are good leaders, right? I's can lead if you keep them focused on the task. I had a situation where someone that I know that was an S was in a company. They were in the HR department, which is actually a good fit for an S, because S's tend to pay attention to people. They tend to be sensitive to, making sure that everyone's happy. This particular S was asked to redo. They had an office in a high-rise office building in a big city. They were asked to redo the floor plan of the office, which meant relocating everyone's cubicles and offices. Okay, there is no worse job to give to an S, because this meant that everyone was upset. Everyone was upset that their office got moved. Why did I get moved away from that window? Why am I now not next to so-and-so? And I really felt for this S, because the truth is, this leader, this manager of this S, didn't realize that this was not a job to give to a dove. They want everyone to get along. They don't want to be in charge of reassigning the offices. So be paying attention to this kind of stuff if you're a leader. So if you're an S, you have to be careful about the fact that if you get assigned to be a leader, or if you're assigned a task, first of all, if you don't think it's a great fit, it's fair to ask and say, I'm not sure this is the best fit for me. Can I do this role instead? Otherwise, you need to realize that for this particular situation, you may need to really dial down your sensitivity. You need to not be as concerned about making sure that everyone's getting along, trust that everyone's going to get along, and be focused on getting the job done and getting the task done. And then you can redial yourself up when it's over. I sometimes think about some of these aspects of our communication styles that we need to dial up and dial down for different circumstances. When you're with a family member, you need to dial down some things that you have to dial up at work in order to be in the workplace that you're in. And again, this is why this self-awareness of this is so important. So if you're an S, be conscious of that. And if you assign an S to a task like that, then you need to be there to support them and make sure that you keep them focused on the task and not on how everyone is feeling on the team. And if you're a C, if you assign a C to a task, or to lead, or if you're the C that is assigned to lead, you must be aware of your deadlines. You must be aware of the time frame, because C's can get lost. I know this. I've been watching this with some stuff that's been going on in quarantine with the two owls that I know. They can get lost in the task. And oh my gosh, it's a beautiful thing to watch. But if you are the person who has assigned them to lead, you have to make sure that you are constantly giving them deadlines and reminding them that they've got to hit those deadlines, and that sometimes going too deep into the detail is not helping. That sometimes that is needed and sometimes it's not. So are there examples of an S in leadership roles that do it effectively? That's a really good question. I'm not sure that I have any off the top of my head. And quite frankly, I've used some public examples in the past, and I've gotten a bit in trouble for that, because some people, particularly in today's environment, some people can get a little activated if I ascribe some qualities to people. But I would say that someone who, for example, is like, and this is an extreme example, but like a Dalai Lama or Mother Teresa, someone who is acutely dialed in to the needs of people, and you need them to lead, to set that example of compassion and leadership. I would say those are potentially two examples of people who are in S's. Mother Teresa certainly didn't speak loudly or fast. She was all about leading with compassion. And so I think that's the qualities of where an S can really excel in an organization, where that's really key. And you just need to be there to support them, because leadership is not necessarily their strength, but their passion for the cause or the passion for the organization can really drive them to be a good leader. So hopefully that helps. And to your point, Tina, about leaders, for example, sometimes you can have an I CEO that the personality so encompasses the company that they become the company, right? somebody like a Richard Branson, for example, is like, his personality is so big that he becomes the brand, so to speak. And in that case, that is good. It depends on the organization and what the fit of leadership that they need is. Okay. So I think I've gone through sort of what some of the things to look for if you're appointing leaders. So these are, or if you are leading with your work style. So here's some of the key dynamics to watch for among your work. So watch for the task and data-oriented group members and the people or feelings-oriented group members, that they can feel like they have different goals. Okay. Yes. I don't know if that's Camille, if that's your name, or but Tesla, yeah. Elon Musk has become this sort of, bigger than life personality that has taken over his brand. And I think, again, I tend to not want to assign those without being able to see people's reaction, because some people think that it's good and sometimes people think that it's bad. So you can see how, for example, a task and data-oriented member can feel like a people and feeling-oriented group member, that they have different goals. So as an I can tell you that sometimes when people say, now wait, we need to step back and look at how we're going to make this happen, it can annoy the heck out of me. It can feel like we're not on the same page. I remember having that feeling. I've had that feeling recently, but also, people who are Ds who, feel like an S, who is about the people in the group, they can roll their eyes and go, oh my God, why are we paying so much attention to people's feelings? For goodness sake, right? They can feel like they don't have the same goal in mind. Now, I can tell you, taxes are due tomorrow. I need my accountant to be in the details because I just want to get it done. I'm not really paying attention to the details. Oh my gosh, I need that accountant to say, no, Chris, we still need this, we still need that. So try and remember as a leader to keep them being aware of the fact that they do have the same goal. And when it's you, keep remembering that those people are actually giving you a gift because they're doing the things for you that you're not necessarily good at. Okay. So someone is asking, how does an eagle work with an owl work style? Because it can be frustrating when deadlines are missed. You're right. This is a tough matchup. And I would say sometimes you need an intermediary, in that unless the owl is working directly for the eagle, sometimes an I, as a supervisor, for example, can be the intermediary with the owl to kind of keep them on track, because the I, or the parrot, is way more attuned to people's feelings. They can use much more helpful methods to inspire the owl and to say, listen, this is great stuff you're working on, but we got to get this done by Friday. What can I do to support you? How can we get to Friday? And take the eagle out of the equation until the end, if possible, because that's a really rough one, because you can really make the owl, the C, be dysfunctional, because they're going to be so intimidating and so frustrated and so angry at the eagle. So if you can have somebody who plays that intermediary role, that's the ideal situation. Again, I think this goes back to sort of one of the opening things I said, which is none of these styles are right or wrong. They all have a place, as I hope that I've impressed upon all of you. It's just the interaction that needs to be managed. That's one of the key things that a leader can do, is the manage the interaction and modulate that interaction. Okay. Because yes, the person who's asking this, I think it's Renesha, it can be frustrating as the eagle when your job, you have been assigned and you're being paid to hit a deadline. Can you find a way to show the owl, that you care and that you really do want to be there to support them, but the deadline is not negotiable? I think that sometimes the C's shut down. You have to be really careful about C's and S's shutting down, because they feel like no one is respecting their work. C's really want their work to be expected. They're doing some brilliant stuff oftentimes. They're getting in the details and they're researching things and doing things that not every mind can do. They need to feel respected for that. So if the eagle can make sure that they're showing the owl that they respect their work and that they need their work as part of the team, that can sometimes help them get back on the same page. Okay. These are great questions. Thank you so much. It helps me to know what some of the questions are out there. So one of the other things to watch for as a leader is that the verbal members can dominate the reserve group members. As I said, D's and I's can talk loud and fast. I know this about myself. I have to be very careful about that, because left unchecked, oh my gosh, I can carry on a conversation for as long as you'd like me to. That's what I don't like about doing this here, is I'd really like to be interacting with all of you. But make sure that, and sometimes as a leader, you need to approach people outside of a meeting and say, I think you need to make sure that we let so-and-so and so-and-so talk. Or you need to, in the meeting, say, hey, let's make sure we hear from this S, and create the space for them. And again, these fast-paced versus slower-paced team members, they can frustrate each other. Know that about yourself. Owls can frustrate me, for sure. I'm not as frustrated by the doves because I really respect their compassion, but the owls can, and their attention to detail can definitely be frustrating for me. It's something I both admire and am frustrated by. So again, we've covered some of these key things for you to remember as a leader. You need to acknowledge and own your own patterns and triggers, because you want to lead from your strengths. And you want to try and leverage the group members with complementary strengths to try and maximize the conversation, because there's magic in there. It's just making sure that you're putting people in the right seats on the bus, so to speak. And again, coming out of this, I really hope that you can go back and identify some of these group patterns and understand what your role is then to help manage some of those, modulate some of those, provide some suggestions where you can do that in a helpful way. And one of the big things is always make sure that you remind the team of the objective and the shared goal, because again, sometimes in the mix of the styles, they can lose sight of that. So we're down to just a minute or two. And so I want to give you the opportunity that if you have any questions or scenarios that you want insight on, you can put them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll just put my information up here. Again, I want to thank DreamBank. This has been really fun. I wish we could have been in person, but we're not. But thank you for coming to this conversation. As you can probably tell, I'm really passionate about this. This has been really important in my work and in my life to have this information, and I'd love to share it with others so that it hopefully can be helpful to you. Okay, so we've got another question. What do you recommend for career progression for S's when many leadership roles aren't as natural of a fit, but your knowledge base and skill set is far beyond entry-level roles? That's a good question. And it's hard, Tina, to answer that without knowing more of the details about what industry that's in or what the personal experience of the person is. There are certain industries that are going to be a natural fit for an S. And you're going to have the most chance for success doing that. But I would say that if there's things that you can groom in yourself, that you have had glimpses of in meetings, that you can groom in yourself, get some additional training or coaching on that. I thankfully in my corporate career early on, and now I have coaches, but back then I had bosses who saw things in me that they would send me to trainings or they'd help me with. And I would say try to groom some of that in yourself. Yes, some of this is natural and innate, but with awareness and with a bit of attention and training, you can bring out some of those things that you don't necessarily feel comfortable about now. Like I said, the S that I told to ask a question in every meeting, once you do that, you're going to see that it's way easier than you think. And so sometimes it's just kind of seeking out some of that training or coaching that can help you sort of highlight the things that aren't as natural to you. But I agree. I think we need more S's as leaders, and not so many D's. We got a lot of D's, and that's not a cut at D's. But we need everyone on this spectrum to feel like they have a place to be a leader. Okay, so the book is called Taking Flight, and it basically takes the disc and puts it into like a narrative of animals in the forest. You're welcome to read it. I read it and I was so fascinated that I took this along with some other things that I do in my coaching work and put it into this workshop. And I think it's a great way to remember. One of the things that I, for example, am frustrated with the Myers-Briggs is I can never, I'm an EM, J, I, whatever. I love the way that the Taking Flight book puts this into personification. So here's my information. If I can ever, reach out to me if you'd like to ask more questions. If I love to do this workshop with groups or with organizations. So let me know if I can ever do that with you or help you. And you can check out some more information on my website. Andrew, I think we're at 1:30.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. Thank you, Chris, for putting that together. I think one of my favorite things to reflect on or think about when looking at whether it's the DISC or True Colors or any sort of personality assessment is how I've changed over the years and like what sort of environments I've been in, you know. And for the most part, I still kind of am a very extroverted person. But as I've gotten older, I was just having this conversation last night with my partner. It's kind of skewed, you know, a little bit, dialed back a little bit more. So, you know, I don't necessarily seek out all that attention. So it's always
Yeah.
to think of it that way. And I really enjoyed the friends' personalities as well as the bird comparisons for that too.
I'll be honest with you, I added the friends thing for this talk because because we're doing this virtually, I felt like I needed to really give a lot of examples of to help people understand the 4 styles. And I think everyone knows friends. So I thought that was a fun way for hopefully people to remember it. And what you said, Andy, is true, which is that maturity should not be underestimated. In that, you know, my 23-year-old self and my 33, 43, 53-year-old self, you know, you dial up and dial down some of those things with maturity and experience. So
absolutely. Again, I just want to thank you again, Chris, for putting this together.
Yes.
Thank you all for tuning in to this event this afternoon. We have a ton more videos we've done under this quarantine that are on our Facebook page. So where you're viewing this right now, which is facebook.com/DreamBank MSN. I think we'll go ahead and cap it there. We'll see you all next time.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone, for being here.